Good morning.
It's time to start our work session to look for the new superintendent of Pinellas County Schools. So with that, Carol, I'm going to turn it over to you if you want to say some words before we begin. I don't know if you want to or not.
Actually not. We're going to just turn it straight
Right over to
to
Ms. Messina.
Ms. Messina and
All right.
her illustrious crew, and we'll move forward with it.
Perfect. Well, we are thrilled to be here today now that the application window has closed and we have a pool of candidates currently sitting at number 19. We believe that they are a diverse field, and we're also very excited. We see some very highly qualified people within the field. The way we're going to work through today, we're going to provide sort of an executive overview. We're going to go through each one of the applicants, and then we're going to ask you all who you would like to continue to see considered. We'll talk through all of that, come up with a pool of ones that all of you agree the board ought to continue to consider. Then from there, we'll determine, do you want to have semifinalists or do you want to move straight to finalists? Part of it will be based on the number that you agree on, and part of it might just be based on your interest. Once we determine that, then I'll start working, well, John will actually start working with you on some directions that we need for the final interviews. And some of those sort of details that we need to work through. So we'll just start right now with Dr. Vogel giving us the executive overview.
Thank you very much, Andrea. And just for your information, at 7:26 this morning, we received an email from Dr. Reinberg, and he is number 8, and he is withdrawn. So you may want to mark that on your sheet, and we'll make sure that that when we do our tallies, that number will not be one we would be able to select. But that's number 8, Dr. Reinberg. Just a brief summary of our applicants. As Andrea said, that gives us 18 applicants. We have 4 with past superintendent experience. We have 6 that they're either current area assistant or deputy superintendents. We had 14 that have doctorate degrees, and we have applicants from 10 different states. So we've accomplished a good national field also of applicants. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to take a little time and go through each of the applicants one by one with their number. And I'm going to go ahead and researched all these, and I'll give you our best opinion whether they meet the qualifications, the minimum qualifications or not. And I'll talk a little bit about some of their past experience, because we had to go back through their past experience in addition to what they currently are doing right now. So the first one I would like to talk about is number 1, and that's Adam Taylor. He is an educational consultant from 2020 to present. And prior to that, he was a superintendent with Rutland City Schools in Vermont from 2018 to 2020. And that district only had about 2,000 students. However, prior to that, he was an executive director and regional superintendent in a district that had 28,000 students. He also served as an elementary principal and was a teacher. So that's applicant number 1. Applicant number 2 is Dr. Jeff Deleon, and I would consider him more of a non-traditional candidate. He's currently the CEO of a family-owned real estate business. Previously, he was president of an online university with about 3,000 students. And then he did have quite a bit of teaching experience and other experience. As far as him meeting the qualifications, if he continues the process, I would have to review his qualifications to see if he does meet the minimum administrative qualifications. The third, number 3, is Kevin Hendrick. Currently, your associate superintendent for teaching and learning services with Pinellas. Prior to that, he was principal at Northeast High School. He's also an acting assistant principal, an assistant principal in Manatee, an athletic director, and also a teacher. Applicant.
Did you say if he qualifies?
Yes, and he does qualify for the meet the minimum qualifications. Thank you, Andrea. Applicant number 4 is Dr. Barbara Hagerty. Dr. Hagerty is currently an Associate Director of Technology Innovation at Stockton University in New Jersey. Previous to that, she was Director of Technology at the Interborough School District in Pennsylvania. That district had about 3,300 students. She had 5 years at the cabinet level when she was Director of Technology with the Interborough School District. And she's also been a teacher and instructional technology coordinator. And her districts were smaller than the preferred qualification. Dr. Cheryl Hobbs, I would say she would meet the minimum qualifications. Dr. Cheryl Hobbs is currently CEO and President of Victory Educational Solutions in Fort Lauderdale. She's been in that role since June 2021. Prior to that, for 2 years, she was Senior Vice President for Achievement and Operations with Edison Learning out of Fort Lauderdale. And prior to that, she was an Assistant Superintendent in Ypsilanti Community Schools in Michigan. And then previous to that, was in the central office in Detroit Public Schools, and she was a principal and teacher up there. And Detroit has more than 50,000 students, so she meets the qualifications that have been set by the board. Number 6 is Dr. Dawn Childress. She's currently a principal at an elementary school in Arkansas with 326 students. Prior to that, she was an assistant principal with Fort Smith Public Schools, and she was an assistant principal covering 2 schools from 2017 to 2018 with 962 students. She was an elementary teacher and a construction business owner, but she does not have the cabinet level experience. Applicant number 7 is Dr. Jason Spencer, and he is Director of School Leadership with Cincinnati Public Schools. Cincinnati has about 36,000 students. He's been in that role since 2019 to present. He was previously a principal in Minster, Ohio, of a 7 through 12 school with about 425 students. And prior to that, he had experience being principal of the Villages Charter School in Sumter County that stretches in that area. And they have about 3,300 students in their charter school there. And previous to that, he was a middle school principal, an elementary school principal, an assistant principal in Seminole County, and a teacher in Orange County. So he's had all the experiences, and we would say that he meets the qualifications. I already mentioned that Dr. Andrew Reinberg has withdrawn, so I'll move past him. Number 9 is Mr. Michael Ramirez, and he's currently Deputy Superintendent with Denver Public Schools. Denver has 90,000 students, and previous to that, he was in Florida. He was Cadre Director, Office of School Performance and Accountability with Broward County Public Schools. You're aware how large that district is, with about 275,000 students. Previous to that, he was principal at Coral Glades High School, which is a large school, 2,400 students. He was an intern principal, an assistant principal, a social studies teacher, and athletic director, so he meets the qualifications that have been set forth by the board. Applicant number 10 is Dr. Chris Dunning. He's currently principal of Wendell Cridd Technical High School in Pasco County. That technical school has about 538 students. Previous position was Ridgewood High School, principal in Pasco with about 1,780 students. But looking back at his experience, he was Director of Employee Relations with Pasco County from 2003 to 2006, which was a cabinet level position. And he also has been an elementary principal, middle school principal, assistant principal, teacher, and he's also been a consultant with Advanced Learning Partnership, so he meets the qualifications also. Candidate number 11 is Stephanie Davis, and she is currently assistant principal at Dunedin High School. Also she previously was assistant principal in Polk County at Lake Region High School. She also has experience as a teacher, an adjunct professor, and she has some business experience as an accounting manager and a controller for several businesses, but she does not meet the qualifications in terms of accountant level experience that I could find. Applicant number 12 is Dr. Tracy Johnson, and she is currently Assistant Superintendent and Chief HR Officer for the Keller Independent School District in Texas. That district has about 35,000 students. She's been in that role since May 2019. She was in that role was promoted. She was Executive Director of HR with Keller prior to that. And prior to that role, she was an Advanced Academic District Coordinator at the district from 2014 to 2015, an elementary instructional leader, a classroom teacher, a media specialist, and we believe she meets those qualifications. Candidate number 13 is Dr. Ellen Solick, and she is currently the interim superintendent for the Connecticut Technical Education Career System. And this is a new model that Connecticut has created for career education. She estimates about 20,000 students in that district. Prior to that, she was a superintendent with Bristol Public Schools in Bristol with about 7,500 students. She was there for 5 years, 2012, 2017. Previous to that, she was superintendent in another school district, a middle school teacher, and also a music teacher. So Dr. Solick meets the qualifications. Applicant number 14 is Dr. Ann Hembra, and she is currently the area superintendent for Marion County Public Schools in Ocala. And Marion County has 43,000 students. Prior to that, from 2019 to 2020, she was associate superintendent for Clark County Schools in Nevada, one of the largest school districts in the country with 328,000 students. Prior to that, she was an Orange County principal from 2015 to 2019, director of professional development, teacher evaluation, senior administrator, coach, and a teacher and assistant principal in Orange County. She meets the qualifications that have been set forth. Candidate number 15 is Dr. Matthew Malone, and he was superintendent of Fall River Public Schools in Massachusetts. That district has about 10,000 students. He was superintendent there from 2016 until he resigned on 11/1/2021. So currently he is not the superintendent there. But prior to that, from 2013 to 2015, he was Secretary of Education for the whole state of Massachusetts. And Massachusetts has more than 1 million students, so he would qualify there. Previous to that role as Secretary of Education, he was superintendent in Brockton, Massachusetts, which had about 17,000 students from 2009 to 2013. He was principal of a high school and assistant principal, and he was a teacher also, so Dr. Malone meets the qualifications. Number 16 is Dr. Ted Dwyer, and he's currently Chief Accountability Officer in Pittsburgh Public Schools, about 22,600 students from 2017 to present. That is a cabinet level position in Pittsburgh. We did check that. Prior to that, he was manager of evaluation in Hillsborough County, 213,000 students. And he had other experience, senior coordinator of research and accountability. He was actually started his work in Pinellas County as a programmer. And he also was in the military in counterintelligence. So he does meet the qualifications there. Applicant number 17 is Dr. Rafaela Espinal, and she's currently Assistant Superintendent for Talent Management with the New York City Public Schools. They have 1.1 million students, so certainly she meets the qualifications with the size of the district. Prior to that, she was Superintendent of Community School District number 12, and they have a model where they have superintendents in various communities up there, and there were 24,000 students under her watch there. Previous to that, she was Director of Implementation in the Office of Teacher Effectiveness. She was a talent coach. She was supervisor of language arts. She was a principal and a classroom teacher, so she definitely meets the qualifications that were set forth. Applicant number 18 is Dr. Kim Moore, and she's currently Assistant Superintendent for Career and Innovative Programs in Pasco County Schools. And I didn't realize till I checked that Pasco is approaching 80,000 students now. She's been there since 2019. Previous to that was Director of Administration in Hillsborough County with 224,000 students, 2018, 2019. She was principal of Middleton High School in Hillsborough, assistant principal for Magna Curriculum at Middleton, assistant principal for Student Affairs, professional development teacher, and she also has some military experience also, so she definitely meets the qualifications. And finally is number 19, our final candidate, Dr. Art Steller. He's currently founder and CEO of Stellar Advantage in Massachusetts, consultant. Previous to that, vice president of the National Educational Foundation of Cyber Learning in Virginia. But Dr. Steller has been a superintendent in at least 6 states. And he also has been a teacher. He's been a superintendent in New York, Georgia, Oklahoma, West Virginia, North Carolina, Massachusetts. 1992-3, he was in Cobb County, Georgia. They have 112,000 students, so Dr. Steller also meets the qualifications. So this is our summary of our pool, and back to you, Andrea.
Okay, so what I'd like to do now is ask each of you to give us the number of the applicant that you believe the board ought to continue to consider. And that's the way we want to look at it. Who would you like to see stay in the pool for further consideration? Just giving me numbers doesn't mean that person will stay in the pool, but it means that that's someone you want to continue to talk about, and we'll kind of move through the process. You don't have to give me a minimum number of people you want to stay in the consideration, and you don't have to give me a maximum number. So whichever applicants you believe the board ought to continue to consider, and then we'll see where common interest lies and move forward from there to kind of see where we are. Does anybody want to start, or do you want me to? Okay, I'll start with you, Ms. Long.
All right, number 3, Kevin Hendrick. Then I go to number 9, Dr. Michael Ramirez. And then my third, Dr. Tracy Johnson.
That's number
12. And 13, Dr. Ellen Solick.
All right, so let me repeat, if you don't mind.
No, go
I want to confirm for Ms. Long, we have applicants number 3, 9, 12, and 13.
Correct.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. All right, we're going with Ms. Kane.
I agree with 3. I was going to say 7, 9, 14, and 19.
Okay, so I have for Ms. Kane 3, 7, 9, 14, and 19. Okay. Anybody else? Here we go.
Okay.
All right. Ms. Hine.
3, 12, 14.
Numbers 3, 12, and 14. All right, Mr. Dudley, did I hear you ready?
Sure. 3, 7, 10, 14.
All right, so for Mr. Dudley, I have 3, 7, 10, and 14. Who's next? Ms. Edmond?
3, 9, 14, and 18.
All right, so I have 3, 9, 14, and 18.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Cook?
3, 9, 12.
3, 9, and 12. Okay? And Dr. Carr?
3, 9, 14, and 18.
3, 9, 14, 18. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. All right, so if we look at that, candidate number 3 has 7. Candidate number 7 has 2. Candidate number 9 has 5. Candidate number 10 has 1. Candidate number 12 has 3. Candidate 13 has 1. Candidate 14 has 5. Candidate 18 has 2. Candidate 19 has 1. Did anybody add anything up differently?
Who had candidate number 13?
I'm sorry, number 13 I had 1. That was Miss Long.
Long, okay. Thank you.
All right, so let's start with candidate number 3. All 7 of you agreed that that candidate, hold on. Oh yeah, I should have known. Mr. Hendrick should remain in the pool. Does anyone object to going ahead and sort of moving his name over into the pool that we would want to continue to consider? All right, so we'll start our pool with applicant number 3. We have 2 applicants. Applicant number 9, which is Mr. Ramirez, and applicant number 14, which is Dr. Hembra, that 5 of you said you wanted to see continue to be considered. Is there any objection to moving those 2 over into the pool to continue to be considered?
Continue to be considered in as we're still gonna have conversation, or we're just moving them for the time being, or that's the final decision?
No, there's no final decision until we make a final decision.
Okay.
We're gonna
All
move
right.
them
Then we're
in
good.
and then focus on some of the other ones. But
We're
with
good.
5 in agreement, do we want to go ahead and kind of move them and say, odds are we're going to be wanting to talk to these people further? Any objection to that?
Yeah, I don't know that we wanna talk to the people more. I would like to maybe have more conversation here before we decide
Yes.
if we wanna talk to them.
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Then we're understand, okay.
Numbers
I'm
9 and 14. So right now, all we're saying is, in our pool,
Right.
we have applicants 3, 9, and 14. But what we're going to do with that pool, we have not decided.
Okay, I'm good with that then.
That's what
Good.
you're asking?
Yep.
Okay. So then we have 1 applicant, applicant number 12, which is Dr. Tracy Johnson, who has 3 people that want to continue to consider her. Would we like to talk about that?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody want to advocate on behalf of applicant 12 to keep Dr. Johnson under consideration? Yes, Ms. Hine.
I'm happy to talk about my notes. She was one of my recommendations. I find her experience really compelling.
Mhm.
I mean, she's been a leader in 2 different school districts in Texas and has a great education background. She has had 12 years in the classroom, including time in the media center, which I think is good. I think she's got 2 great letters of recommendation, one from each of her districts, which shows, you know, her transparency and relationships there. I thought I found some information about an interview she did with United Way, and I was struck by that interview and her feeling, you know, important to serve others.
Right.
So I really, just overall, as I researched her and read her letter and recommendations and saw this pretty solid experience, I thought she'd be a pretty neat person to talk with. Is she the right person? We don't know, right? We have to go through the conversations, but I think she's interesting. I'd like to talk with her.
Ms. Cook?
I think the experience that she's had in Texas translates easily to Florida. A lot of their laws, a lot of their requirements, a lot of their legal things that people have to learn when they come in from out of state are very similar. So I think that translates easily also, as well as the things that Laura pointed out.
Okay. Any other comments?
Well, I was gonna say, on the other side of it, I thought it was very academic heavy, and the experience, what Carol said is true, she's coming from, you know, Texas, but I thought it was more academic related in her, you know, what she's accomplished. And that's primarily why I nixed her. I wanted more practical.
I just want to make sure you're she's HR. She's been, her past position was, she's the right associate superintendent for human resources.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the same person.
I read the whole
I thought
thing
the
now.
district was rather, I thought the reason why I agreed there was some potential there, but I think that it was the size of the districts were small, sort of equivalent to an area superintendent in our counties or you know, so might not have the full perspective of the magnitude. So that was my reluctance with, you know, my process of looking at how big, what was their experience like in large districts, dealing with large amounts of data and concerns, and then also that while Texas is similar, certainly the political climate, but the, which I think is important to be able to navigate, but I think that it is not Florida. So
Right.
that was my reluctance with that one.
Ms. Edmond?
Similar to Dr. Carr, the demographics include 28% disadvantaged students. And then I looked at the time frame that she was in those positions. So 3 years here, 3 years there. But I'm glad we're having this discussion because I think we're going to be looking for a consistency, and having someone with the long-term experience would be a priority for me.
And that's one of the things I noticed with a lot of them,
Yeah.
jumping around a lot.
Ms. Carr, did you want to say something?
And I agree with looking at potentially in further considerations when we're considering not just the size, but also the demographic of a district. If it's somewhat comparable, or if they've had some experiences with a comparable district, not only in size, but in demographic, because we are more diverse than some of the school experiences these individuals have had.
So I'm hearing, you know, some not necessarily agreement. We do have 3 people right now that we've said we want to continue to consider. So do we want to add this applicant or do we not?
Should we put a maybe and continue our conversation?
I'm okay not,
Or just,
and I'm one of them that had 12. She was my third choice, but also the weakest of the 3, in my opinion, of what I was looking for. So I would be okay not moving forward with that. I don't know how the others.
Okay.
yeah, I am too, after hearing from my colleagues.
Okay.
Okay.
So then we have 2 applicants, numbers 7 and 18, that 2 people were interested in keeping in the pool. Applicant 7 is Dr. Spencer. Applicant 18 is Dr. Moore. Thank you. You decided not to keep the person in that had 3 that wanted to move them forward. How do you want to approach these 2 that have 2 of you that want to move them forward?
The same way.
The same way?
I chose Dr. Moore, but then just because of her experience with large districts, and I think that's extremely important. So that's something I put on my criteria as being high. But then looking at the time frame serving in those positions, that was a concern to me as well, because do you really know the job with 1 or 2 years of experience in those levels? So I like to approach it the same way. However, I wanted to have this discussion.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
When I made phone calls to Hillsborough and talked to several supervisors and board members, they told me she has the potential, but they don't feel at this time she's ready to take a district as large as ours, and that worries me.
Okay.
Who are we talking about? I didn't put names, I got numbers.
Or number 18.
That
Number
would have
what?
been number
18.
18.
Number 18, okay.
Yeah. So then it sounds like you all have 3 upon whom you all agree you'd like to keep into consideration, numbers 3, 9, and 14, which are Mr. Hendrick, Mr. Ramirez, and Dr. Hendrick. Okay, gotta get that straight.
Yeah.
Got it.
So there are 3. The next question would be, do you want them to go through a semi-finalist vetting process, or do you want to just move straight to, these are the 3 we want to bring in for interviews?
Interviews.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. Ms.
Sorry, just for thoroughness sake, we talked about number 18 more that had 2, but we did not talk about number 7, Spencer, who had 2, so I didn't know if they...
Oh, because I said, how do you want to handle these? And she said the same way, so I appreciate that.
So
But
does
let's just
anybody-
confirm.
Do we have to have discussion about number 7?
Do we want to? Does anybody
Sure.
want to?
Yeah.
Dr. Spencer?
Yeah, I was one of the people who put Dr. Spencer
Yeah,
on there.
Joe.
But we already, I think, addressed this with one of the other applicants, in that my only concern, I put him there because I liked that he had Florida experience. But based on what we were talking about earlier, his experiences with the smaller school district may not be comparable to Pinellas County, and so I agree with that. But we talked about with the former candidates as well. So it was quite a bit smaller because there's only 36,000 students, so it's a third the size. So if we were kind of going with the idea that we wanted someone who had experience with a similar size district or larger, then I think that kind of answers that question.
Just want to make sure.
Cincinnati.
Number 7.
Cincinnati Public Schools, right?
36,000.
Yeah.
Ms. Edmond?
And I have concerns about his history, his employment history.
Any other conversation on number 7?
No.
Okay, so then
So we wouldn't copy.
we have 3 that you all have agreed on. Number 3, which is Mr. Hendrick. Number 9, which is Mr. Ramirez. Number 14, which is Dr. Hembrook. And I started to hear some of you say that you wanted to just go ahead and say, let's invite him in and let's move on with our interviews. But I want to confirm with that. Yes, Ms. Edmond?
Can you elaborate on what would be the semifinalist process?
Certainly. Typically what would happen is we would ask semifinalists to respond in writing and video to a series of questions. They would submit those questions back to me by a certain deadline, and then I would share them with all of you. Once you've received all of that information and reviewed it, then we would reconvene, and I think the date that we have on your timeline is May 3rd. We would reconvene on May 3rd. You would have had the information from these questions, the responses to questions, and you would determine who of these 3 do you want to invite for an interview. And then those would be the finalists that you would bring into the final interview. But we would go through the same process as we just did. We would only have 3 numbers in this case. Which of these 3 do you want to continue to consider? Yes, ma'am.
And if we were to bring these people in as finalists, that means we would technically be paying for 2 candidates to fly in, their hotel stay, and all of the other things that go with the finalist portion.
That's correct, but help me out here. Where's Hembrook from?
Yeah, she is from Ocala.
Okay, so
So
she's
we're not
pretty
being
local.
expensive.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it would
to
be
do that.
one.
It would just be one, correct.
Correct. So what's the will of the body? Ms. Cook?
I said move forward
Oh.
with these as, interview them.
Bring them in for finalists.
Mhm.
Commit?
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm seeing some heads.
Final
Yes,
interview?
I agree.
Yes,
I have
yes,
a
question.
So would that bump up the time frame?
No, because we advertise this is when the interviews are, and people, when they apply, kind of block out that time. If you change it, the odds of people still being able to coordinate, given the types of jobs they currently have, might not work out.
So something to consider, if we were to go with the semi-finalist portion, we would have the opportunity to kind of feel out who we would really want to come in as a finalist.
Correct.
So I am leaning towards the semi-finalist portion.
Okay. How do the rest of you feel? I see here some saying finalist, go ahead, and others saying semi-finalist.
I say finals.
Yeah, we're down to 3. I think that's.
I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
I think that we've picked the top 3, and I think that means more finalists to me.
Okay. I
don't know how
have
others
3 over
feel.
here saying finalist. What?
I can see the benefit of asking the questions and having like another layer of information about the candidates with a semifinalist process, and it doesn't impede the timeline.
Right.
It does add additional burden to the applicants.
Mhm.
Do you charge us more for it?
No,
So, it's not an additional cost, it's not additional time, it's already built into the timeline. So I'm weighing the thought of burdening them with having to make a bit, asking, but I think they should be able to do that if they want to be a superintendent.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would use the word burden, but yeah.
But it is,
Yeah.
they're, obviously, the jobs that they currently hold, we know how time consuming they are and the rigor of the work, especially this time of year, so. But it might help us better have a greater depth of knowledge about them, you know, more insight. Not necessarily that we would eliminate them, but just have them complete the video and answer a series of questions, complete the video. And I hope that during that time, you're also going to do your vetting
Sure.
process of social media and those sorts of things. And then, you know, we might potentially eliminate someone based on the vetting, but at least, I don't know, because we have two people that we're completely unfamiliar with, and to allow for a little bit more insight into these other two folks, because frankly, we do have an internal candidate who we have much more familiarity with, so it may in some ways give us a, make sure we have our due diligence.
Ms. Hine?
I think I want to clarify what you said. I mean, so if we did it really almost more as an additional information gathering, getting to know them a little bit better, having some of these questions answered, but we do not have, I just want to clarify, we do not have to eliminate, just because we call it semifinals. I mean,
All semifinalists could be finalists in the end.
in a Little League tournament, that means someone's eliminated.
Okay, I
I would,
understand.
I would say, go ahead.
This was, so it's a different, you know, if it was 3, we're getting to know them, you're doing your vetting, I can see that, but I still think I would be approaching it with the idea that the 3 of them are really finalists, unless there was some glaring reason from your vetting or the interviews that eliminated someone. I would just see it as another chance to get to know them.
Yeah.
Dr. Vogel?
Like a first interview. Yeah,
What,
like a first interview.
one concern is this, going into the finalist round, we think it's best to have at least 3. Because if you get down to 2, then, you know, it's always possible that someone can drop out. And
As we
2
saw this morning.
Right, if you get down to 2, then it kind of presents an awkward situation if something that doesn't work out. So that would be one reason to go with finalists when you're down to 3. The other thing is we can still provide information that you'd like to get for those finalists, additional questions or whatever you would like to have them provide that information to you.
I think that's what we're saying though, right? Is that we wouldn't have this as an elimination round.
Okay.
This would just be further information gathering.
So
We're down
Before
to
they come for
3.
an interview.
Yes.
Truly
If-
finalists, but
Yeah.
further information gathering, so ask them to answer the questions, ask them to make the video, and then we would still proceed as
And if
finalists.
we're going into it that way, then
That's good.
I would be okay.
That's kind of like the middle,
And that's what
that's what you
that's what I was
suggested.
suggesting.
Okay,
That's the idea.
okay.
I feel
So,
a lot more comfortable with that.
I wasn't otherwise.
So it's not an elimination.
No.
No, not elimination.
elimination
That's what
round,
we're
right.
saying.
to better prepare you for to better prepare the board for your impending interview, here's information they're requesting you to respond to.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll call these
Finalists.
finalists,
Good. All right, I'm good.
and we will have the finalists submit responses just to better
As another
provide
step
some
in the
additional
process.
information. Perfect.
Good.
So the next thing I want to talk to you about is the actual questions we would ask them to respond to get this additional information. Now, I do realize we're not live streamed, which does give us a little bit more opportunity to chat through some things. However,
It is recorded and they can ask for it.
right, I was going to say, however, you have 6 categories in your strategic plan. So typically what we would recommend is that we would get one question from each of 6 categories within the strategic plan, and then your chair would ask a general leadership type question. So if it's okay with each of you, I can work with each of you. We'll go through the categories. You can tell me which category in your strategic plan you're more interested in asking a question. I can provide you with some sample questions, and then we can work together over the next day or two, each of us individually, working on your individual category for your question. Then we'll pull those questions together, send them to the finalists, give them the deadline, and they'll respond back. So you wouldn't necessarily know the question that Mr. Dudley's asking, but you know he's asking it in the category that he would say he's asking. Are you comfortable with that?
Will we know the categories for each person before we leave today?
Yeah.
We do it right
Yeah.
now.
Dr. Carr.
And can we coordinate it also with staff support? Can they be included in, if we have any questions?
Sure, absolutely.
Make sure that we go to, like,
We try to do
potentially
everything through
still
Kathy.
Or the person who oversees our strategic plan.
Okay.
To help support us in any way. We
Sure.
develop a question.
Sure. Is that
Unless it's one that Kevin oversees.
right?
Yeah.
That's
That's a
fair.
little, yeah.
So the categories are student achievement,
Oh, that's a good point.
culture that promotes learning in a rewarding, healthy, and safe environment, equity with excellence for all, career and college readiness, effective and efficient use of resources, communication and stakeholder engagement, and general leadership. Actually, you know what, Dr. Carr, I've been thinking about your question, and I forgot that Kevin is internal.
Yeah, so we don't want to use staff.
It's probably best not to, because we want to keep everything above reproach, and we don't want anyone to accuse him or the board of sharing information. So if
Just be you and the.
you work with me, I've got usually a battery of, a pool of questions I'll share with you in this category, that kind of thing. So then, does anybody have a strong feeling about any one of these categories that you want to try to thumb wrestle your peers with? Yes.
Equity with excellence.
All right, is anybody opposed to Caprice taking equity? All right, equity, Caprice, all right. Hold on, my machine needs to turn on. There we go, Caprice. All right. What other category does anybody have a strong compunction towards?
I could take fiscal resources or community engagement, maybe.
Communication and
Which one?
stakeholder engagement?
Or fiscal resources.
I don't see one that says fiscal resources.
What you said, responsible use of resources.
Effective and efficient use of
Effective and
Effective and
efficient use
efficient.
of resources.
Oh, effective and use, it doesn't say physical, that's the part that threw me.
Fiscal.
So I've got effective and efficient use of resources, as well as communication and stakeholder engagement. Does anybody want one of the other ones of those if you're,
Here's the resources one, I'll do the resources.
okay?
Unless somebody else feels.
Anybody opposed to her doing the one on resources?
What is it? I'm sorry.
It is the effective and efficient use of resources. Anybody opposed? All right.
I like general leadership.
General leadership, anybody opposed to him taking that? All right, so now we still have student achievement, culture, career and college readiness, communication, and
Also
engagement.
Student achievement.
Student achievement,
That's hard.
anybody opposed?
Yeah.
You guys are easy to get along with today. Career and college readiness, communication, I saw your hand go up.
I'll do career and college readiness.
Career and college readiness, where am I? Right here.
What's left?
What's left is student no.
Culture and communication.
Culture,
Culture and communication?
culture and communication stakeholder engagement.
I'll take that.
Which one?
Oh,
Those
there
are
are
two.
two of them?
Yeah.
Which one do you want?
One is culture,
You decide,
I don't care.
communication and engagement.
I'll do culture.
Culture. Ms. Long, Ms. Cook.
Okay, I have communication.
So
They're
then,
all important, or they
What do
wouldn't
I
be
have?
our strategic.
exactly, that is correct. So let me just review so
Stakeholder
everyone knows who has what. I've got student achievement with Dr. Carr, culture that promotes learning in a rewarding, healthy, and safe environment with Ms. Long, equity and excellence for all with Ms. Edmond, career and college readiness with Ms. Kane, effective and efficient use of resources with Ms. Hine, communication stakeholder engagement with Ms. Cook,
Okay.
and general leadership and coaching 101 with Mr. Dudley. All right.
Excuse me, Andrea. Can I just ask a clarifying question? The questions that you're discussing now are for the finalists at the interview, or that you're gonna get additional information?
We're going to get additional information.
Okay.
However, you bring up a good point, because when we do bring them in for finalist interviews, we would typically do the public interview around the thematic areas. And so it could be that in the public interview, once all of this comes in, that each of the categories you've just signed up for may be the category you would ask in the public interview some different additional questions. We could change that up, or you could keep them the same. We'll talk about that in May when we come back, when we start talking about the final interviews. But it's possible the person could stay in that thematic category. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay.
So in both settings, whether it's going to be via interview and writing, or whether it's going to be face-to-face, we will use these same categories. Anybody may be asking it, but both times they'll get questions in these categories.
Yes, because they're your strategic plan.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Not just because they're random categories, but yes. So then the next question I have to ask is, typically we would have either 4 written, 3 video, or 4 video, 3 written responses. Does anybody have a?
3-2. 3-2 instead of 4-3.
Yeah, we have 7.
We're a bigger county.
So does anybody have a strong feeling like, I think this question in this category ought to be video, or I think this one ought to be written? I will say the written responses are limited to 500 words, which is actually very much of a challenge.
Yeah.
The editing on that, people tell us in the entire process, editing it to 500 words is the biggest challenge they have. Yes, Ms. Heim?
Right off the impulse, I think that leadership, culture, equity with excellence could be video. I think maybe 4 video and 3 written. I think resources can be written.
Student achievement could be written.
I'm sorry?
Student achievement could be written.
Okay, so we would put
effective and efficient.
written for student achievement, written for the resources, video for general leadership, video for culture, video for equity and excellence. That leaves us career and college readiness, communication and engagement, video or written.
I'd like to see video
On which one?
on college and career. You just get more feeling
Yeah.
from seeing the person speak
All right.
than you do
Where you
reading
feel
it.
the passion.
You just see them.
Okay. But then you don't know the writing skill and editing. I mean, there's one of the reasons we do both is to try to provide you with as many
really
data
like that.
points and as many opportunities for response as possible. So here's what I have.
But as a superintendent, do they really do their own writing and editing?
I think you might be surprised. Yeah, they might.
I have their cover letters. They did.
Yeah, their cover
They
letters,
have-
you could see a lot of
They have
variation in the
administrative
cover letters.
assistants that do the grammar checks and do the typing and all of that kind of thing.
Right, but it's the content.
Yeah.
Content.
Yeah.
Gosh, I hope they're writing.
Are you
However-
suggesting that they wouldn't write the answers, or are you saying that you don't think you would rather do all video?
I'll go either way. I just don't know that we can put as much credibility into the writing of it
Okay.
if we're looking for grammar and editing and that type of thing.
I think you can though, because
Hearing
like
them speak, you're gonna know whether they're using the proper grammar and moving forward.
Well,
We'll see
they're
it either way,
introductory.
so I'm just pointing out.
Because they do have to write, I mean, I don't know about you, but when you read an email and obviously someone hasn't proofread it, it makes an impression. And the same with these cover letters that contain, there were some of these cover letters
I know,
with
I was
typos
circling.
and errors in them. So that certainly helped eliminate some
It did
people that might
eliminate
have been, you know, if you're, because that also plays out not just to your ability to edit and write, but your ability to pay attention to detail.
And to ask someone else to
For
look
help,
at it.
right, like if
to
you know
have a
that's a
second-
weakness of yours, you'd ask for, you'd make sure your secretary is
I'm good
excellent.
either way. You don't have to tell me, I'm just pointing out something.
I just
That's
think
all.
with video, the advantages are you can see how well spoken they are. You can see the intensity of how important the question is to the candidate. Their personality really will come out. And I just think you start seeing what direction they're going and would they meet what Pinellas County needs. With written, it depends on the reader's impact of what they've read. You know, some might have, answer it and you think, oh, wait a minute, but that's not really how they wanted us to take it.
Yeah, our goal is to try to provide as many different opportunities so you see them in different situations so that you can get the full picture. And I'll actually give you a few examples of where it was really helpful to have people in different scenarios. We were doing one, it was a live meet the candidates, actually both meet the candidate things is what I'm gonna reference, but one of them was a live on camera. It was during COVID and it was a Facebook Live thing. I was talking to the person and the applicant, he froze right in the middle. He started answering the question and then just totally froze. But it was the way he was able to recover.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually was the one that ended up getting the job. But he was just beyond mortified when it happened, but it happens to people, right? And so you want to see how they're going to recover. And another example, we were actually in a physical meet and greet, and I'm going to tell you on the video and in writing and even in the verbal interviews, the person, he came across as a little bit academic and a little bit, I don't want to call him stodgy. He wasn't stodgy, but when he did the live meet and greet, I'm telling you what, he was like a preacher up there on the stage. And the whole community was like, wow. And it was completely unexpected. So we try to give you all those opportunities so you can get the full picture of someone.
See, and that's where I think you get a better, why I don't care one way or the other, whether it's video or written, a combination is good, I'll go there, is because I think you really get to know the person when the question is asked and they have to answer it. You know it's them, you know it's their passion or not.
Right.
And that's what I think where I would get the real sense. So whether it's video or whether it's written,
Doesn't matter
I
to
don't care
you.
one way or the other.
So here's what I have, and you guys can correct me if I've misidentified any of them. I have student achievement will be written, culture that promotes learning will be video, equity and excellence for all video, career college readiness video, effective and efficient use of resources written, communication stakeholder engagement written, and general leadership video. And I will be working with each of you over the next day or two. My goal would be to get the questions out to them sometime on Friday so that they have the weekend, because as you all know, these people have pretty high-level jobs where they don't have a lot of free time during the day. So the goal is to give them one weekend, maximum two. I would probably, based on the date of May 3rd, ask them to return them. Let me grab the calendar here. I would probably ask them to be returned on, let's see the month. April. May 3rd is a Tuesday, so I would probably want them to be in maybe by Sunday at noon on May 1st. That way I can get them to you guys before the end of Sunday, and then you'd have all day Monday and Sunday night to at least review them. So that's how we would approach that if I can get them out by Friday. As far as the questions, like I said, even before I leave today, I can communicate with each of you. We might even have the question, you might even have it in your head, that's fine. But now I'm going to ask John to talk to you a little bit about what those finalist interviews look like. We need a little direction on a few of those pieces.
Thank you, Mr. Racine, and again, good morning, everyone. In your packet, I think you were provided with 2 sample interview schedules. One was, should we have 3 finalists, or one was for 4 finalists. So at this point, we have 3 finalists. So if we can look at the sample interview schedule that is set up for 3 finalists. Currently, and based on our timeline, we would have the out-of-area candidates coming into town on Tuesday, May the 10th. And for those out-of-area candidates, we would like to maybe identify a hotel that, we could have those persons stay in. So potentially I can work with Scott or Kathy and we'll do that. The Wednesday schedule, if I could run through the schedule, then I'll kind of come back and ask for some specific input from the board on a few items. Understanding that y'all have that commitment on the morning of Wednesday, May the 11th, in talking with Kathy, she felt like we could kick things off at 11 o'clock. So on that Wednesday, we would have the 3 finalists arrive here at your district administration building. And of course, FSBA and the host, and I'll talk a little bit about host, and of course the board members will be coming in whenever you can prior to 11. And so we would be interviewing candidate A this before the entire board from 11 to 12:30. With 7 members, board members, we feel it's appropriate to have an hour and a half for each interview. And while candidate A is being interviewed by the board, we do want to have some activities for candidate B and C. So our recommendation would be to consider a district host or host. There are some districts that will provide, say, 2 members, maybe from the superintendent's cabinet. Some districts have used, because they are familiar with the district, and set up a tour that would kind of be time sensitive to have candidate B, back for the lunch hour here on site, and candidate C as well. So you could look at, lunch would be from 12:30 to 1:15. So while A is interviewing, B and C are on kind of a mini tour for an hour and a half.
Can I say something?
Yes.
Even if you have an internal candidate, you still treat that person just like any other candidate. They would still go on a tour. I just want to confirm that.
Exactly. Then after the lunch, and lunch could be on site here, and that this might be an opportunity if you had an organization that you would want to kind of quote have sponsor lunch. And of course, the lunches and dinners aren't really extravagant. They're kind of quick. Some folks have box lunches and different things, and certainly the board could have lunch as well with the candidates and the host back here on site if that's an option the board would like to consider. And then candidate B would then be ready for his or her interview from 1:15 to 2:45, while candidates A and C are still kind of doing tours or mini tours, and then candidate C would have their interview with the board from 3 to 4:30. At 5 o'clock, if the board would wish to have dinner with the finalists and or their spouse or anyone other the person that may be with the finalists, there's an opportunity to do that. If the board chooses maybe not to have a dinner with the finalists, then we would recommend that maybe some light dinner be provided here on site, so we could have, FSBA could have dinner with the finalists and really get them kind of ready for a 6 o'clock community meet and greet. And the option would be, if the board would like to have it in person, where the community can say come to a high school or come to a center, a civic center maybe, and meet the candidates, or there's an option to do something virtual. We will say that the virtual possibilities, really, you get more participants. Some folks are still a little hesitant to come out. They have busy schedules. The virtual concept, and Andrew, I'll try to run through this, would be during the day that you're interviewing the finalists, Ms. Messina would work with staff to have a site set up that people who may be viewing those interviews can submit questions electronically to Ms. Messina, potentially to ask candidate A this question. So we kind of go through the day taking input from the community, and then around the end of the day, Ms. Messina will kind of condense that information. And then after the dinner from 5 to 5:45, at 6 o'clock, there would kind of be, we call it the Miss Messina show.
No, we don't.
Yes, we do.
They do.
We do. And the Miss Messina show will be live streamed, and she will kind of ask each of the finalists a series of questions that came in from the community during that day. And of course, the community could view that live stream. That way you don't really have an in-person, you do it more in a virtual manner.
It's just a little more informal than
Yes.
your formal
Yeah.
board interview. This is more informal, like discussion, little less formal.
Right. So we could set that up to do it virtually, and that would kind of conclude the activities for that Wednesday. So just to kind of get a feel, does the board feel comfortable with moving forward with kind of having a host assigned to each of the finalists, and then doing some tours where we're sensitive to time and also traffic, and kind of keep the applicants that are not being interviewed busy with some tour activities? Okay. And I guess with the lunch on that Wednesday, is there any organization that comes to mind that you would want to kind of sponsor that, or is it something just the district would like to do here?
Sometimes it might be the chamber, it could be
Yeah, I think
economic
we have a
development,
couple
the
of
foundation.
We may want to highlight our Pinellas Technical College. They have a culinary program that does an excellent job. And also, I think the Education Foundation would want to be part of this.
For the lunch.
And
So potentially you could do one of those groups for lunch and
one
one
for
for dinner,
Mhm.
and they would both be here on site?
Or at Enterprise, or at Stavros Institute, which is also centrally located.
Okay.
Would there be one person, could be our point person for that, to try to arrange that?
To arrange it at the Education Foundation?
To arrange the whole, the tour and the luncheons and so forth, so we would have one contact person?
Yay!
Okay, great.
I'll
Okay.
work with her
Okay,
on that,
great.
but yes.
Yes.
And when
Okay.
we started this process, Stacy Byer, the CEO of the Education Foundation, was very quick to say that she would like to host the community meet and greet. So if we had dinner with the Education Foundation, then we could go right into the meet and greet,
That's a good idea.
and we're all there. At dinner, it'd be more relaxed, so we could really get to know the candidates and their spouses. And they could get to know us and feel our personalities, because I think that's really
Well,
important.
they are they are
45
certainly
minutes.
interviewing you as much as you
Yeah.
are interviewing them,
Right.
for sure.
Right.
And it's a, you know, we're so proud of the Strabo Center with the things that we do with our students, and it's going to be growing.
That'll be one of the places they visit, I'm sure, but
Yeah.
you know.
Understand a little more
Looks like-
about the community meet and greet, what we mean by community?
Yeah, well, it could go any number of ways.
If you wanted to have the in-person where you might have dinner with the foundation and the board and the finalists, then after that dinner, depending on the location of the dinner, would that site be appropriate to right after dinner have a kind of an open house where the community can come in? We will have each finalist have about 5 minutes at the mic to kind of introduce him or herself to the crowd. We kind of interchange them, you know, on stage, off stage, on stage, off stage. And then after each three speak, we kind of assign them to corners of the room, and the general public just mingles around and visits with each finalist. That is very well, in one of our last searches, it was, you know, about 100 attended, and it was, people stayed around, they moved to every candidate. Dr. Vogel and I will be there to kind of make sure no one person takes too much time with a candidate. We kind of keep the line moving around. It's not speed dating, but we want to make sure that we're moving around pretty good. So that would be kind of the concept. Interviews during the day and tours, a dinner at 5. The only thing is, the dinner is 5:45, 5 to 5:45, so it would have to be fairly quick. That's why if we could have the meet and greet at the same site as dinner,
The Strabo Center's excellent.
we can kind of be ready to go.
And there is a feedback loop after that for the
Right.
citizens to give the board their feedback, just so you know.
Okay.
And we turn that around that night, so the board has that immediately. It'll either be electronically or by hand,
Right.
however we do it.
Before we go any further with the decision, I think we need a logistical question. If we are doing some of the interviews here in the building, and this is for Beth probably and Dr. Corbett, if we're doing the interviews here and they're going to be broadcast, we obviously have video all set up. If we're going to do the same thing at Stavros, do we have the equipment to get it all set up and do online and?
So
Okay,
wait, what
so
would you
can
be
we-
doing at Stavros?
Hybrid community.
The hybrid community?
In the evening.
The hybrid community.
Are you,
No, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
It'd be hard to do
The
that.
meet and greet would just more or less be not videoed, it's just open to the public.
It's either one or the other. We can do the live one,
yeah,
or we can do the face-to-face one.
okay,
If you
I
wanna
misunderstood.
do-
I thought there was going to be the opportunity for them to do both.
We
You can
can
show up
maybe
or-
figure that out. I mean, we might be able to figure that out, but I'd have to pluck them.
Okay, whether they're online for people to view or not, we would be live streaming the speakers No, nothing?
Not normally.
So what, the community, you either come or you're not?
The problem is, it's a chance for someone to meet the candidates one-on-one.
Yes.
And so it'd be hard to capture all that, because people
Okay.
are rotating
All right,
around.
then the logistic question is, it's set up here, that's already there. I wanted to make sure that if we were going to have setups in both places, that we had it. So we could still do the dinner and the meet and greet at
The
Stavros
face-to-face
Institute.
meet and greet,
Right,
and
right.
we wouldn't need any video for that,
Okay.
correct?
All right.
And
I think, what's the
at
harm
the
in?
Stavros Center, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. At the Stavros Center, you know, they have the big great room, which is a fantastic place to mingle with people. But then they have individual areas with 3 classrooms, which is perfect. So you could have candidate A in one room,
Perfect.
B and C, and whichever, you know, if they want to see all 3, they can move. We'll have some kind of and then, you know, when they want to come back, they can then come see the board, and we'll be there to meet and greet them.
I think that meet and greet all needs to be in the same room.
Okay.
And in just different parts, so people can flow a little more, rather
Okay.
than this room's full, so I'm gonna have to go, this room's full. And we don't want them emptying furniture out of there.
No,
You know,
no.
so I think just putting them in different parts for that would
Yeah, the flow works
work.
better when they're all in one room. I mean, we can work with whatever you want, but the flow works better.
But they do have
Okay.
another room for a meal
Yeah.
if we wanted to do that.
Ms. Edmond, you had a question?
I was really excited to hear about the virtual format, and then as we had conversation, I was thinking more about a hybrid. When we put it at one location and at that time frame, there might not be a lot of opportunity for people to submit questions, which is why having a hybrid, if possible, would be a great opportunity.
When is the event that
That's what I thought was happening, which is why I was
Maybe
asking.
we could do that.
Yeah, like,
Here.
couldn't we just set up
At
the
the, I
time?
mean, I think we could at the very least at the meet and greet stream, you know, the hybrid piece could be that the remarks, the welcome, to be by our chair or by the chair of the search committee or by FSBA, you know, so someone's gonna welcome it, kick off the evening, you said each candidate gets to share some remarks. You know, so whatever that piece is, could at least be live streamed. I'm not sure how a Q&A would work.
Well,
I think, oh, works
It was
in
my
the classroom.
understanding that you would receive questions from the community and be able to ask the candidates.
Well, that would be if it is a virtual session,
So that's what,
if it's totally
because
virtual.
I can see how you could do it a hybrid, like you could get the questions or ask people to submit the questions beforehand, before the actual meeting, so then you have those questions to ask the candidate and we're able to stream.
But then you can't break up into different groups. You're now.
Oh,
now,
are you
now
talking
I'm
about
imagining what you're saying.
They can be there for the
Panel.
questions.
Now it's almost like a panel, like a candidate forum. It's almost like a panel where
I
they're
think
being
that piece
Q
is
and
important.
A
It's
the
not
whole
really
time,
community if.
Sure.
as opposed to
Yeah.
break out, being
Yeah.
able to break
Because
out and chat.
Yeah, we could have a little time
We
when
have about 45
they're
minutes
asking
to-
some questions, and then maybe
I
only
think Carol's
15 minutes at the end where people are going around.
That's what we're saying. We can do that. We can get questions. I can ask 1 or 2 questions of each candidate, but it will limit then the amount of time for interaction. So we can accommodate both, but it just makes the time frame shorter for the face-to-face interaction.
Okay, so we're back to, do we have the equipment and time to set up? I'm seeing a yes. Okay, I'm seeing it from both places? Okay, so we
the
can do
cons-
that.
So following dinner, the concept will be that we'll have a live meet and greet. The program would be that we have a welcome from the chair. And then candidate A would go to the mic and introduce him or herself. And then receive 1 to 2 questions at the max from Ms. Messina. And that could be the responses or live streamed. And then we move to the second candidate, 3 minutes intro, 2 different questions, move to the next candidate, and then after that, they disperse into the room in their assigned area, and they meet the.
30 minutes or something.
Right. So that time frame for all of that is 6 to 7:30,
We might have to expand it out to 8, John.
because if you get.
It's just
say,
too
if-
long.
if-
It's
yeah,
too long when they have interviews the
Well, I was
next day.
thinking, I know,
Yeah.
I'm fine with 7:30, but we get,
The first piece with only 3, thankfully it's not 5.
yeah.
Yeah.
We can get that done. We can allocate 10 minutes per person, 30 minutes, and then transition time.
Have an hour for
Yeah.
the,
Okay.
We'll
Maybe
make
an
it
hour.
happen.
We can do it.
We'll make it happen.
And I think it's okay if it's until 8 o'clock. If they're gonna be a superintendent, I mean, our principals work, our high school principals work from 7:05 or 6:30 until every football game's ending at 11 every Thursday night. Or, you know, I mean, and this job, they're gonna be working, and
Past
the
7:30.
experiences that they're in right now are
And they better
incredibly
be with it the
long.
next morning.
I mean, I hate, they, if anything, we could,
Stamina.
8 o'clock, you know, you work until 8 and get up and go to work at 8.
typically the hour with the meet and greet flow is a appropriate amount of time based on others we've had. So I think 30 minutes for the questions,
We'll make that happen.
an hour for the public. So,
Yeah.
and 100 people kind of move through within an hour pretty good.
So we should.
And if we see that, you know, we need to extend it 5 or 10 minutes, we can.
Yeah,
Howard's gonna have to spend the
last time we had a hard time turning out the lights. They were
Right,
like,
we don't
"Come on,
run people out. Right, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, it's important for those who cannot make it in person to see that I can wait. I think it's important for those who can't participate in person to have that opportunity, so
We'll make it happen.
Right.
Thank you.
having this conversation is great.
And the live interviews are all streamed, so people could tune in and watch all your interviews through during the day too. They're all live streamed too.
Okay, so that gives us some good direction for the Wednesday. Thursday, May the 12th, that's the time we've set aside for your individual one-on-one interviews with each finalist. And as Dr. Vogel mentioned, the night of the meet and greet, we'll have an opportunity for folks to provide some input, and we'll get that to you hopefully that evening. So when you go into your one-on-one interviews on Friday, you'll have some of that information that you may want to follow up on if one of the members of the public, you know, has comments about a candidate, you want to follow up on it, then that's kind of what the one-on-ones are for. If you would look at that schedule, we would suggest potentially just to have a light continental breakfast here at the center before the interviews begin. And your interviews with each finalist is 45 minutes. And I do apologize, Ms. Hahn, for your late schedule, but with 7 board members.
I was gonna thank someone for that.
Oh, good.
Perfect.
I like
For
it.
me.
Okay.
I was thinking, I wasn't sure who to thank, but
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I just began with the board chair, the vice chair, and then everyone else in alpha order. That's kind of how I did that. But really, if there is a board member, let's say that on that Thursday morning, for an example, you know, Ms. Kane, your schedule for morning from 8 to 10:45 for your interviews with the 3 finalists. If for some reason your schedule may work better, if you could switch, say, with Ms. Edmond or someone for an afternoon, if y'all have any real conflicts, maybe we could switch with another board member, but we'll kind of go with this as of now if it'll work with your schedule. Everybody's kind of good? Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, good, we'll go with that. And maybe a lunch on site that day, because it is kind of it can be a long day for the finalists, so kind of have lunch for them. We also like to maybe have, you know, something like you have set up over here, you know, water and coffee kind of throughout the day, and so people can get that quick energy to get through the next hour or two.
And just so you guys know, we're on site for the whole interviews, all 3 of us, and so we technically, yeah, we have long, that doesn't matter to us, but we technically will get them from the interview with Ms. Hine to the interview with Ms. Kane and kind of move them in between, see if they need anything. They know they can reach out to us at any time if they have any needs or concerns or whatever it might be, and we never know. Sometimes board members get lost. Remember last time? They're like, where is board member so-and-so? He's supposed to be right here. He was here, and then he disappeared. So we'll track you down if we need to, and we're sort of like the, what do you call it, the police, the traffic cops. Yes, we're the traffic cops. We'll be there the whole time on site. So if you or they have any questions, we're there to answer them.
And I will let you know as well that what I will do now, when we contact the finalists, I will determine from them if they're the one finalist will fly in, of course, driving in, Are you gonna bring a spouse or significant other? Do you have any food allergies, things like that? I will give them kind of their personal schedule, so they don't have to try to figure this out. This is kind of a quick overview. So I'll give them their personal schedule for the 2 days. I'll also prepare a schedule for each of you as board members, so if you just wanted to look at your schedule, I'll get that to you as well. But we kind of start communicating with the finalists now.
And just so you know, since Mr. Hendrick was applicant number 3, which is the lowest number applicant that is in the pool, that he becomes candidate A.
I was just gonna suggest that we do them alphabetically for candidate A, B, and C,
I will tell you why we don't do that.
okay?
We actually, the first, whoever gets position 1, some people see that as a benefit, some people see it as a drawback. Whoever gets position 3, some people see as a benefit, drawback. So there's all sorts of theories on which is the best position and which isn't. And so we could do it alphabetically, but we feel like the person who applied earliest becomes the first applicant. And we may have even said that in a previous meeting. The second applicant, Mr. Ramirez, number 9, would be B, and then Ms. Hembra would be C. So no one can say there's any favoritism, no one can say there's any, like even, so Hembra would have been A alphabetically is what you're saying. And then some people might say you're doing that so that Hendrick doesn't become the first. I mean, we have always used the process of, for earliest number. If that changes, I just don't want you to have criticism for
So it
somebody
doesn't-
accusing something of something.
It doesn't appear to be a ranking?
No, never. Mm-mm.
Never.
No. No, because we're very clear from the beginning, the lowest number becomes A. If candidate 2 had been in here, that person would have been candidate A. It's always based on the order in which applications are received.
Okay.
And there are candidates who kind of are pretty straightforward with, I want to be last. And we've had that in the early stages of searches, and we've just gone through this. A is, the first one is A, second is B, C, and it does alleviate some conflict.
Well, we may have told them that when some of them have applied.
All right.
You know, some people apply earlier to get a lower number, some people apply late, because we always try to do it consistently in the order in which they're received. That's what we hang our hat on.
And with an internal candidate, I'm a little more cautious that it doesn't appear as though
When we
we're ranking them or
do,
anything else. So if they've already been told that, then that's what we need to do, and I'm okay with that.
what I will also make sure is that when the chair starts each interview, in the introductory comments, and we'll write out a script for the chair. You know, typically it's welcoming the candidate, introducing the board, things like that. I'll include that as part of the script to
Okay.
ensure.
That'll work.
Good.
I'm good with that.
And I think the consistency is key, because that's what you said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Friday?
I'm sorry?
Are there activities on Friday or no?
No.
Just
No, ma'am.
okay,
Just Wednesday and Thursday.
okay, I just want to make
One more
sure.
question.
Yes, ma'am.
And maybe you're still getting to it. Can you elaborate on what will be included in the vetting process that you'll be doing in terms of background and vetting and
Yeah.
social media and pieces?
We utilize Green Spoon Martyr, a law firm in Orlando, and they do extensive background checks, and they coordinate with your school board attorney on the process, and then communication flows between your attorney and board members when that process is complete. And we'll start that process now that we know who the 3 finalists are. We've done some initial work on that, but we'll finish it up.
Right, but what would that include? What's the scope?
Right, that includes any kind of bankruptcies, property owners, lawsuits, social media checking,
Traffic citations?
traffic citations. It's a complete history of every individual.
We can't get the highest level of background check. Only your HR department can do that when there is a job offer. So they will each have pretty detailed ones, and then those, like he said, will go there. And then once you have a job offer to someone, your HR can do the highest level of background search. Yeah, the fingerprint and stuff like
Fingerprint,
that.
and we'll work with that, and everything, our process includes that, everything is pending, when the board makes their selection, pending all of the final
Correct.
processes that the person has to go through.
So that's the legal background check. The other vetting is us making phone calls, us communicating, like one of these people. Now, we happen to know Mr. Ramirez because he was a finalist in Polk County. So I have already spoken with the, like my colleague, the person who has my job in Colorado. I have a good relationship with her, so she knows Mr. Ramirez. So when I first reached out to her to get some, you know, I want to get the full picture of these applicants. I talked to people who've worked with, I'm going to go back to Mr. Ramirez because he was in Broward. We talked to people who've worked with him in Broward, people who've worked with him over in Denver, people who've worked with Ms. Hembrook in Marion. We'll talk, and I think she was in
Orange, too.
She was in Orange, but she was also in Clark. So I'll call Jesus Jara, who's the superintendent over there. So we do that sort of vetting to get a good feel for these people, but the legal vetting is what we do through those background checks.
We also encourage board members, though, to also do their checking through other board members and any
Sure.
other checking, individual checking that you'd like to do also.
Part of the legal one that we do also includes social media checking. Because every now and then there's something on social media that we need to know about, and so they do a pretty deep dive. I will tell you that sometimes when we do background checks, things happen. And first off, let me say, just because something turns up on a background check doesn't make the person, it doesn't necessarily eliminate somebody, but sometimes it needs an explanation. And so whatever we find out, we call them and say, hey, when we did a background check, we found this. In fact, we had one applicant where there was it a bankruptcy? But it wasn't his. It was who he sold the house to, no, it was a foreclosure. The applicant sold his house. The people who bought his house, the house went into foreclosure under them, but because they bought it from him, his name was somehow on one of the legal documents. So we needed to understand the connections there and check that out, because it's not that a foreclosure of a home would eliminate somebody, but we just needed to know more information because the board would have to then answer to that. So when something hits and either it needs more explanation or more detail, like even a lawsuit, because almost anyone who's of any position of leadership is going to be named in a lawsuit along the way. So we want to know more about that lawsuit. Is it just because they were the principal, or are they personally being accused of something? So we then dig deeper into that. A few other things. First is that when these finalists send us their responses to the written and video, or give us the written or video responses to questions, you'll get them all at once. And once you get them, we'll also be sharing them with Kathy to post. So they will be publicly available. People can watch them, people can read them, and you'll start getting feedback. The fact that you've got 3 people here, you will start getting lobbied. People will start sending you all sorts of pros and cons about all of the applicants. I encourage you to say thank you for your information. I'm taking all information into account, and that is it. Do not respond beyond that. The fact that you have an internal applicant, you probably have already started receiving from people. Just thank you. I'm being open-minded while I'm going through this process. We look forward to the process, anything generic like that, but you will start hearing things. We had an applicant from North Carolina once. I don't know what he did to his community, but they were mad at him. And so citizens from North Carolina started communicating with board members and saying why this was a terrible choice and that sort of stuff. They still brought him in for the interview, and he was actually a good candidate. But it'll shock you how much people reach out to you and either advocate for or against somebody. Just please say thank you for your information, because we value the input. And you need to take it into consideration, but just be prepared for that. And that's all for me. What have you got?
That's good.
Anything else for you?
Ma'am, I'm good. I can go to work on the schedule.
We
Good.
have a-
Okay,
It-
I'll work
we're talking
with you and
about
Kathy on the
I'm gonna go
meals
back around.
and that type
This
of
time.
thing in the hotel and.
The May 3rd meeting.
Yes, ma'am.
The agenda for that meeting.
The May 3rd agenda for the May 3rd meeting.
It really would be to
I don't know if that was set because if there were semifinalists.
We still need to
or
have,
not,
yeah, we still need to meet.
But we'll
Yeah,
meet.
yeah.
Right, we would like to kind of finalize the interview schedule, you know, after filling in all the blanks.
It probably
So
won't be a
I'm
very
seeing that
long.
we have
It'll
May
be
3rd
short.
meeting, we have the 11th and 12th interviews, 17th is a board meeting during which we will select
Select.
and vote. And then where does discussion, you know, how does contract discussion?
We're gonna talk
We're
about
gonna
that.
get to that
It's on the
today.
agenda today.
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 Okay, we'll do that right now.
Great, thank you, Ms. Messina. So, regarding the superintendent's employment contract, when you do vote to make the offer, what will happen on May 17th is I will draft an agenda item once we know what the decision is, and the action by the board will be to authorize the chairperson or whomever, if you had a chair of a search committee, authorize a board member to make the offer to the candidate and authorize me, a school board attorney, and somebody else that you would select. Usually there's been one board member, the two of us, to negotiate an employment agreement with the candidate, with the offeree. And so what I want to start the discussion here today is to start to get some direction from the board regarding terms of that contract. So I've already started working on a draft of a contract based upon Dr. Grego's 2012 contract. He had that amended several years later, which is not uncommon for superintendents, especially ones coming from the outside or new superintendents. Here's your first contract, you prove yourself. Maybe 3 years later, we will work on additional terms of that contract. But I want to go through a couple of different categories of things and see if I can't get some direction from the board. Base salary is easy because you've already determined that. 275 to 305, that is the range. And so I'd have nothing more to say about that at this time other than the person with whom I'll be negotiating from the board with the candidate. We will obviously start at an advantageous position for the board and then negotiate from there. Most superintendents, and I've gone through, as has FSBA, but I've also made my own a chart regarding the 12 districts with whom we normally compare ourselves. Their superintendents, what their salary is, what their fringe benefits are, the term of their agreement, all of that. So to the extent that I've reviewed, looked at all those contracts, to the extent that they have these different categories, I can give you some guidance on where people are. But the next topic I want to talk about is contribution to a tax sheltered plan. And so as you probably know, in public education, we don't have 401ks. We have 403bs and or 457 plans, which act in a similar way to a 401k in the private sector. And so most superintendents, certainly in our history and in these other 12 districts, the board is contributing a certain percentage of the base salary to the superintendent's tax sheltered plan. And so, for example, I can tell you that Dr. Grego is 10%, Osceola is 15%, Seminole is 8%, Polk is 10%, and I don't need you to write all this down unless you like to, but Orange is 4%. So, anywhere between 5 and 15% is traditional for in addition to the base salary. And remember, our advertisement gave the base salary and then also said benefits commensurate with the position and competitive with other like districts. So our superintendents, the last several, have had a contribution to a tax sheltered plan. That's something that I would recommend because it is consistent with what other districts are doing. And so I would just like to propose that range of between 5 and maybe 10%, with the authority being given in that range. Okay. So the next particular area of concern is Obviously, we will work in reasonable and necessary expenses for travel and professional organizations. Some contracts list them specifically, or they might list a specific number of organizations. You can belong to 3 professional organizations. Obviously, the Florida Association of District School Superintendents, or FADS. There could be a national organization that a superintendent may want to belong to. There may also be 1 or more other state organizations that a superintendent may want to belong to. At this point, my recommendation to you would be to simply say that the board would pay for reasonable expenses to professional associations and dues for a certain number, whether it be 2 or 3 professional associations. And so that superintendent would need to go to the board, just like a principal would need to go to the board and seek a temporary duty elsewhere or a TDE form, said, I'd like to travel to Juneau, Alaska to attend the National School Superintendents Association. And the chair might say, why are you doing that during testing season? Or I'm not going to approve that, or I'm going to approve that. And that's up to the chair. And so that would be my recommendation, to treat the travel in that same way. Any questions or concerns about that? Yes?
Is that a current practice?
It is. Sometimes some boards give an actual dollar figure. They might say you have up to $2,000 or $3,000 worth of travel in a year. There might be some years where that's not used completely. There might be some years where it's justified to go over that amount. I would recommend that it be just within the purview of the chair to approve or deny the travel request. But that you list a certain number of organizations that you pay, and you not put a dollar figure in, because those dues may change from time to time. And please, if any of the 3 of you have anything you'd like to weigh in, because you know maybe more with respect to what other districts are doing as well.
I was just gonna say $2,000 or $3,000 isn't gonna get you far on travel.
Yeah, right. Right.
But that has always been our practice.
That's correct. That's right.
So why
That's
change
right.
that here?
So and Dr. Grego, and I'll refer to his contract just since it's the current contract that this board has approved, it doesn't have a specific number of organizations, and it doesn't have a specific dollar amount. It just says exactly what Mrs. Cook said. You asked to receive approval for travel, and you're granted or not granted. So that's what I would recommend we continue to do.
I have one question. If people feel more comfortable, it could be if the chairman turns it down, it could come to the board. We do the same kind of thing, if that would make people feel a little more comfortable. If people are okay with the chairman signing off on it, we can continue that practice as well.
I'm fine with the chair.
Okay.
Next is civic and community activities expenses. Sometimes superintendents have a certain amount of funds that they can use at their discretion for community activities. They may want to put the district's name as sponsoring a table at a certain charity function or something like that. And so right now, the district superintendent really has sort of a discretionary budget on the administrative side to do things within the district. Obviously, you have a budget for the office of superintendent, but this would be in the contract for the superintendent to say, I'd like to have a few $1,000s, whatever it is, to use at my discretion to promote the district with these other organizations where it might cost money.
And what's the current, I mean, if we
There
already
is-
have a discretionary budget that goes through, we decide as an organization.
I think those things are happening now. It's not listed in Dr. Grego's contract.
I don't think it needs to be added.
Okay. I think he is just taking it out of the superintendent's office budget. Yeah, okay. Now, another item that is fairly consistent across these districts is an automobile allowance. And so usually it's listed as a monthly, and even though I went to law school, I can do simple division, so sometimes it's listed as annual. And so the traditionally it's between $500 and $1,000, and there would be language in the contract that says this takes the place of any reimbursement for mileage you would seek, obviously. So this is to assist the superintendent not only making sure that he or she has adequate transportation, but that no matter how much you drive or wherever you drive, in or out of the state or country, that this is part of this is the reimbursement you're going to receive. So right now, Dr. Grego receives $750 a month. Alachua is $650, Collier is $650, Seminole is $750, Manatee is $650, Orange is $800, Hillsborough is $400, Miami-Dade $900, and Palm Beach $1,200. Obviously, this helps assist obtain car insurance as well, and so you can tell from the different metropolitan areas they generally go up. And let me just say as an aside, as I'm going through these, just remember that these are entire packages. So if you say, well, wait a minute, Hillsborough is only $400, well, that superintendent might have negotiated a higher base salary and a lower car allowance. And so what I would like to do is have the authority with whomever I work with to negotiate an automobile allowance somewhere between $500 and $800. That sounds accurate. Yes, Dr.
One
Vogt.
thing on those two, sometimes that amount is for in-county travel. And then, but if the superintendent's traveling to Tallahassee, then out-of-county travel, he would get the reimbursement normally. So that's just a point, depending on how you would negotiate.
Yeah, I'd like to have it read that is for any travel that
Any
needs to be
travel at all,
done for
yeah.
business.
Yeah.
Right.
Cleaner that way.
Yeah. I mean, if they need to go to St. Louis, they're not going to drive.
That's an out-of-county.
And then the board will approve the travel expenses for the flight and hotel.
David, on
Yes.
the auto allowance, 500, that would include the purchase, the monthly payment for the car, right?
No, it's whatever the superintendent wants it to be. They are
Okay.
just going to receive this amount per month. That is a negotiated benefit that covers all of their automobile expenses, including mileage.
'Cause
So if
boy-
they own their car, they're just going to collect $500 a month.
Okay, I think.
But they're not going to submit a mileage reimbursement
Right.
form to you for going up to
They
Tallahassee.
have to do the January one.
Yeah,
Right.
because I'm just thinking with the way gas, and in Pinellas County, we are such a populated area, the stop and the go, which puts more wear and tear on the car, is better when they drive out of county than in county, you see what I'm saying?
Well,
It
Dr.
doesn't
Grego
cover all
is
their
receiving, yeah.
expenses.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Grego, the board did negotiate $750.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to expand the range above 800, that was 10 years ago.
That's changed in 10 years.
But then they can renegotiate their base salary or
That's
the
right.
other pieces of it.
Okay.
This is just
Okay.
one component of it.
Got it, okay.
If you'd get the Porsche, you'd get more money.
The next category, a couple of different leaves, and I just want to explain what we've done and what I'd recommend we do. Sick leave, vacation, those would just be the same as any other 12-month administrator. And that's what it's always been, and that's what it traditionally is, so we will do that. The next one is a life insurance plan that is, sometimes boards give their superintendents a unique and individual life insurance policy. It's a term policy, and sometimes it goes up to be $1 million or something like that. We have had some other districts provide a $100,000 policy, another district provided a $1 million policy. What we have done in this district is that every employee receives a board-paid life insurance policy in the amount of 1 times their annual salary. And that is what Dr. Grego is receiving right now. That is what past superintendents have received. So I'd recommend we just move forward with that. Okay. The next one is moving expenses, if needed. And so when Dr. Grego came over from Osceola County, he was afforded in his contract in 2012 $2,000 for moving expenses. If moving expenses are needed and requested, I would like to just seek authority to provide whatever the reasonable moving expenses are. I can't give you a number, because if it's somebody moving from in-state out of county, it's going to be a lot lower. And what I can do is work with whoever on the board I'm working with on negotiation, and we can just do some quotes, you know, by calling some different moving companies. But if somebody needs to move, and I apologize, who's the furthest one away of our three?
Ramirez.
Denver.
In Denver.
Denver.
Right. So that would be more expensive than $2,000. One thing also that some boards provide, we did not provide for Dr. Grego because it was a relatively simple move, but some boards do provide temporary housing allowance in a dollar figure. So your minimum quals were to come in and move into Pinellas County within 6 months. I would assume that we would want somebody to come here and be here on day one. But if they cannot move their entire family from out of state or out of county, would they be able to have $1,000 a month or $2,000 a month to rent an apartment month to month? And so if that's necessary, I'd recommend that too.
Do it quick.
With a time frame?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, you said 6 months in your ad,
That's
so
what
I
you-
would think
so
that would be the
the
cap.
time. Okay,
Yeah.
that was my question.
Okay. Then severance pay, which we've actually talked about before, and that is, there's a Florida law now for about the last 10 or 12 years that said that the severance pay of a superintendent, or really of any employee for that matter, cannot be more than 20 weeks of their last annual salary. And so I'm going to talk about some other non-compensation terms in just a moment, but every superintendent in these 12 districts, plus Dr. Grego, with the exception of one, and that is in Duval, they all have 20 weeks of severance. And so Duval has 18.
Oh,
And so I don't know where they started there, and we may not necessarily need to start at 20, but I would like for them the authority to start at 20, to have the authority to have a 20 max, but start lower than 20. Okay.
12. Tomorrow.
Well, that's 3 months, I mean, most.
Families.
So there is one other area of compensation and fringe benefit that I want to turn it back to Dr. Vogel on, but then he's going to turn it back to me to talk about other contract issues, so don't get up. Dr. Vogel.
Florida statutes provides 2 training programs for school superintendents. They were originally put in statute for elected superintendents, but we have encouraged boards to also include those in appointed superintendent contracts, especially if you're bringing someone new that has not been a superintendent into the ranks. The first is called the Superintendent Special Certification Program. And completion of this program is the only way you can get school superintendent on your certificate in Florida. It's actually a certificate. In order to qualify for this, you have to go through training institutes and pass 4 tests on legal aspects, economic forces, employee relations, and core concepts of leadership. And the tests are given by FADS. And those people that complete that will receive the certificate. And also, for elected superintendents, those people would get $2,000 a year. If you're elected superintendent, the state pays for it. If you're appointed, the board pays for it. But it's really an encouragement. In fact, we've had some of the boards require that in the job description, that superintendents go through these programs once they're selected. So we'd like you to consider that program also, and that's called the Special Certification Program. That program takes about a year to complete, so if somebody starts in July, they would not be able to complete and earn that till probably the end of the year, for next year. Once the superintendent completes that program, there's another program called the Chief Executive Officer Leadership Program. And that program will usually take about 1.5 to 2 years to complete, and it's a specialized project that is based on a district need or priority. And superintendents, once they complete that project, then it's reviewed by an impartial panel, and they could be awarded anywhere from $3,500 to $7,500, depending on the quality of the product that they complete. And so both of those projects, and I'm sure Dr. Grego would encourage anybody to participate in those programs, are nice incentives. The second program, the Chief Executive Officer Leadership Program, that person probably couldn't earn that for at least 2 years or more. But I'd like the board at least to consider both of these training programs when you're negotiating a contract with the superintendent.
And it's good to know they're out there.
Yeah.
We're putting it, most of the appointed superintendent contracts now include those provisions in there. Thank you, Dave.
So am I hearing that the majority of the board would like us to
Yes.
to include something on those too? And then we could put time frames in there that they would have to complete it by, giving them a little buffer. So instead of 12 months, maybe 18 months. Instead of 2.5 years, 36 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or maybe
Now-
before the first contract extension or something.
Well, yeah, well, that's true. Yeah. That's a good segue, Ms. Messina, because I was getting ready to talk about term and termination. So, so the term of the contract, in other words, the length of the initial contract, they are traditionally 3 years in length, and that's what I would recommend here. But under termination, in light of that 20-week severance pay, the contract I recommend to be terminated, or to be able to be terminated by either party without cause. And so if things are not working out with your new hire, after 1 year, even though it's a 3-year contract, you can provide notice and terminate the contract just by a simple vote without having to delineate any cause or that anything's done wrong. It's just not working out. Similar to just a probationary contract that a new employee might receive. So, without any objection, that's what I will work on doing. We will also have a provision for termination with cause, and that's needed for a couple of different reasons. One is statutorily, because it could relate to the 20-week severance pay where you would not need to pay that. And then the board may just want to, if things are going really horribly, may want to actually go forward and go through the termination with cause to get on the record that this was a termination with a reason, as opposed to just without cause. So, any questions or concerns about those? Yes?
David, what about their side, if they would like to terminate the contract, what are the terms?
Yep. What I would put in is that I would ask that if the superintendent wants to terminate without cause, that he or she provide at least either 90 or 180 days notice, and if it's done within the first year or 18 months, that they would then owe the board a certain dollar amount to conduct a new search to replace that person.
Leaving you high and dry.
Yeah, I don't want you to hire them.
They could also potentially forego their severance or a certain portion of that severance if it's within the first year.
Yeah, right. I mean, we could tie it to the severance. We could also,
Makes more sense than them paying.
we could also say the severance is not eligible to be paid if you leave within 1 year. So I want to protect the board, so that somebody doesn't come in for 3 months, get a better offer, and then leave. So I want there to be a financial disincentive for them to leave.
We know it's a big decision that they're making, so they're making it, with thoughtfulness, but also, you don't just get.
There are recruiting firms.
I don't think, and I'd ask our guests, but I don't believe the superintendents have viewed these as negative. If in fact they are undertaking a very serious undertaking and are committing to Pinellas County Schools, they should have nothing to worry about.
So what's customary on this side of the equation?
Normally, it's, 90 or 120 days notice. I mean, and typically that would, I'm not sure we've seen it implemented anytime recently, but when I go back a while, it might happen when a family circumstance changes and there might be the health of a parent that they end up having to care for, or, some sort of an exigent circumstance that you all wouldn't want to hold the person hostage anyway.
And I think then that would be up to the board
Right.
to waive that if they wish.
To waive it, yeah.
Yeah. I believe, I don't want to misspeak.
But times are changing. I mean, I say we haven't seen it, that doesn't mean we won't see it anytime soon. Things really are changing, so.
So
Yeah, if you just,
90 days notice, 60 days.
90 days.
At the very least, long enough for you all to get your ducks in a row and get an interim placed. That's really what that's about, is
Right.
you all need some notice because your district is a big moving thing, yeah. And so you need some opportunity to figure out what your next moves are and protect the district. It's really about protecting the district.
right, and just to give you some illustration, Dr. Grego's current contract says that if he left, this is obviously passed, but if he left within the first year, he paid back $10,000, or it was withheld from his terminal pay. So I'd recommend we still have that in there unless there's objection.
No objection. It definitely
If
needs
you
to be
leave
in
within
there.
12
It
months
needs to be
without
in
cause,
You could tie it to the moving expense, you could tie it to any specific,
yeah. They're not necessarily cutting a check,
Right.
especially if there's the severance pay that's allowed. Yeah. Okay. Well,
Yes, so if they leave without cause within the first year, they could either completely forego severance. or
That's right.
10 years.
Yeah, we don't recommend.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you can put it in there where it's not necessarily punitive too.
yeah.
You know, you don't want to go in there with that. You know, we've seen.
we have seen a lawsuit actually where there was it was in the contract that if the superintendent left, they had to pay for a new search.
Right.
It was if they left before the end of their contract, but then there was lawsuits ensuing over it, it really was not worth it.
That's why I think time.
It was nasty and,
Yeah.
Well, how about if we put something in that says if they leave during the first year of their contract, they don't get severance pay or they only receive a very small portion of the severance.
Yeah.
And then starting after 12 months into the contract, that's when they would get the 12 to 20,
Yeah.
whatever we.
That's a nicer way to say it. I just don't like.
leaving within the
anything-
first year, maximum 8 weeks or something,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
4 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Then,
So I think we should say that though, so if they leave within the first year without cause, 90 days notice, and they're eligible for 4 weeks of severance.
Well, we don't have to make that decision.
that's
We're
right,
just
I don't
giving-
want to,
giving-
I don't
we're
want to
giving
put the
parameters
terms
right now.
in concrete.
But that may be where we start, could be where we end.
Right.
Okay, so that's
We're
part of
just
this.
giving David
Yeah.
head nods on direction.
You know, it may end up being 120 days with 4 weeks.
At any time with no notice.
Okay, right,
We can terminate without cause.
That's correct.
At any time without notice.
that's correct,
But it'll cost you
Majority.
20 weeks.
Majority.
that's right. That's
And
right.
in doing so, then that.
And would be a real stability issue for the district. I certainly don't advocate.
Right, right, right.
Or less
Some
than 20
significant
weeks, depending on what the
wrongdoing.
contract is negotiated.
That's right.
And wouldn't that mean we would get together and have that discussion?
Then,
Oh,
of
that would have to
course,
be board action at a
We
public
have to
meeting.
vote and- yeah.
You'd have to vote to terminate the contract.
But the amount paid would be determined in the contract.
It's the 20 weeks.
We actually just had this in Volusia.
Right.
The board, if you read the headlines, you've seen it. The board chose to terminate prior to the end of the contract, and so there's a,
Without cause, it
Contracted.
was 20 weeks.
Yep.
Plus the,
And you know that going in.
yeah.
Right. Okay, we'll work something up on that. And with respect to the term of 3 years, I'm not going to put anything in the contract that it is automatically rolling or any, this is a 3-year fixed agreement. This is going to be a new superintendent for you. And so as we approach the end of that 3-year term, either or both parties will approach each other, I assume, and ask for a renewal, and then at that time, there might be new terms to consider. 2 other issues. One is a physician's report or an annual physical that is required. Then the superintendent would submit that to the board office, saying that they are fit for the duties of the office of superintendent. Dr. Grego has that in his current contract, and that has sometimes been adhered to and sometimes not by either party.
you don't need it until you need it.
You don't need it until you need it, so it's the recommendation of FSBA to put it in. That, I'll take that as a yes.
Okay.
So how do we ensure that both parties are making this happen since it's in our contract?
Right. Well, first of all, yeah, I mean, if it didn't happen and neither party enforced it, then it's basically both parties mutually agreed to waive it. But there could be legal issues with that if then you wanted to enforce it later. And so we can just set up a calendar. I can work with Ms. Howe
checklist on
and,
evaluation.
you know, on March 1st or January 31st, we can send the superintendent an email and say, please remember, by July 1, you need to submit a physician's report with the board office.
And it doesn't have all the details,
Right,
like you
it
won't
just
know his
says,
yeah,
cholesterol
letter,
level.
Right.
Yeah,
It
right.
just says fit to serve kind of
Right.
thing.
Right. Exactly. Then the last issue I have is the evaluation. And so even from the beginning of Dr. Grego's contract, the evaluation is tied to the district strategic plan, which I think is a very good thing. His amendment fleshed that out even further. And so I would like to have an evaluation, but this is open for discussion for the board and input by your consultant. Yes.
I'd like to have it be before the flushing out, the prior linking. I know it's been flushed out after there was evidence, but I think the initial contract that was in place was much stronger in terms of the board evaluation.
And so one thing I will just point out here is that the first year of the superintendent's employment will be somewhat unique, because if you're looking at data or results from the district strategic plan, this person will not have been in office to effectuate any of those changes. It'll be lagging data. I think I'm using that term correctly.
Right.
Right, and then but then the first year you should still evaluate
We have an evaluation the first year, absolutely.
with an evaluation instrument to be determined by the parties or a more generic. Yes, Dr.
By the
Hope.
board, and the form should not be in the contract, but the
No.
board should determine the form.
Yeah, exactly. So the language in the contract would say during the first year, the form will be determined
Agreed.
by the board.
Right.
Right. And then subsequent to that, it will be based upon measurable data based upon the goals in the district strategic plan.
So the 2022, he will not be evaluated.
Or she.
Or she, right. The first evaluation will be around June of year 23.
No, that's the first year's evaluation.
Oh, that's, okay.
You'll evaluate at the end of the first year.
Okay.
It would likely be in the summer of 2024. It would be when you start evaluating based upon data from the district strategic plan.
You could think
There's
of
other
include-
data in the plan though, that's
To
not
include.
student achievement data. There's other data in that
Right.
plan. There's other measurable objectives in the plan that aren't specifically student
Yeah.
achievement data that would be accessible, and also so you could link it to the strategic
There
plan.
is more
But
qualitative.
I think, yeah, they are, some of them, you know, or it might be even that the plan is revised this year. When the new vote to the new plan might have even different measures that are in there that aren't all heavily weighted in student achievement, like retention rate or, you know, but the point is the person's new, so none of their actions really are it's still, the measures from the strategic plan are still really measures of Dr. Greco's work, not the new person. So you want to make sure that first year, there's other methodology. And prior to this type of evaluation that we used to do, we had the superintendent evaluation was very different than this. It was on specific measures determined, you remember, Ms. Cook, determined by the board. And it was linked to the to the district strategic plan, but there were other more relevant things added to it related to leadership qualities, community involvement. There were other things that were more function of the superintendent office that were included in the evaluation that are no longer included in the evaluation, including things like the results from the annual climate survey, and those sorts of things were incorporated into the superintendent's evaluation, which now are not. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct, and that, you may be describing what we did before as being the first year's
I was gonna say,
evaluation.
that's appropriate for the earlier
Right,
year.
definitely,
Yeah.
I
definitely.
like it when they talk over me, because what I said is correct.
That's right.
Absolutely, no,
Yeah.
that's absolutely right. And some of the boards have a 6-month, especially with a new superintendent, either the option of a 6-month evaluation, or they also give a 6-month evaluation.
Yeah, like an interim. And
Right, interim.
The other thing you have to do is, we have to come up with that evaluation tool within the first 60 days.
Right.
Or whatever, because the superintendent needs to know on what measures
Right.
are going to be evaluated. So we can't wait until May of next year in order to do a June evaluation.
And you may,
But we have prior models.
you may identify 3 priorities in your first year. Here are the
Right.
3 things we really want
Right.
you to achieve. This is what you're going to be evaluated on the first year.
Exactly.
And then,
And look back at that other evaluation that you had before, so at least get that thing
And
going.
there were lots of things we didn't like about it, or things
Yeah,
that changed,
yeah.
but,
But
you know,
they-
it could be that you determine X, Y, and Z.
And that's something that I would work directly with the board on, since everybody else reports to the superintendent, or reports to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to somebody who reports to somebody. So,
Yeah, but my
But
point
I-
is, if the first one's gonna need to be different, but we also need to let them know immediately
correct.
on what they're going to be evaluated.
Right.
That's
Then,
big.
prior to that second year,
That's fair.
halfway through, or, you know, whatever, of this year, we need to start talking about, not this calendar year, but this contract year, we need to start talking about what that next evaluation
correct.
would look like.
So in the meantime, what I can do is pull some of the old evaluations that were not based upon, the recent
Solely, that's,
district strategic plan, and maybe share that with you. And but again, we can sign the contract as I'm envisioning it without this being finalized, and then we can talk about it in a workshop or something like
Not
that.
the
even one person's
responsibility of
input.
ours.
What's that?
I really like this discussion, because we found boards that the evaluation is always difficult. You always put it aside or wait for this or that. And so I think this is very important to have this conversation, and with David kind of monitoring, and I think it'll work well.
And I think our responsibility needs to be in that contract, so that
Absolutely.
we're not advocating it or ignoring it.
That's right.
And if you fail to do it, and then
Uh-huh.
you try to fire with cause, and they can point to it, you have
You
a
already have
problem. And then,
evaluation.
so
Yeah.
you might say that we have cause to fire, but you were supposed to have done an evaluation and didn't do it, so now you have to go to the without cause, which costs you the 20 weeks instead of whatever you negotiate with cause. So there are implications for not fulfilling your side of that contract.
Okay, so I think I have direction going forward. Is there anything else, our guests, that as far as contract at this
Excellent.
point?
Excellent discussion.
Anything from the board members?
Well, thank you for your due diligence on research for all the other districts.
Okay. And then, so just start thinking, not necessarily today, but maybe on May 3rd, who the board would like traditionally to work with me when we're actually negotiating with the person that you select.
It could be the chair, but it doesn't have to be. If somebody has a particular background in contract negotiations or experience, it doesn't have to be the chair. Can
I'd be
be.
glad to volunteer to do that. I've had a lot of experience with hiring and things like that. But I'm also happy for our chair to do it, or someone else.
We can have further discussion on May 3rd, since we're meeting anyway. And the last thing I'll say is, when I reach a draft of a form contract, I'll email it to each of you individually, and if you have any particular questions, just contact me individually. That's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Anything else from the two of you?
No.
With regard to the questions for the finalists, if you know your category, if you in your mind start thinking kind of what you want to ask, I think you each have my phone number. I will be here, and I can stay here after this meeting if anybody's ready to do that. But then otherwise, if you could call me sometime in the next 24 hours, and we can work through that. I'm pretty flexible the rest of today and tomorrow. So if I see you call, I'll step out of the meeting that I'm in, and we'll kind of lock that in. Okay?
And are you emailing, I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that. Are you sending us some of your suggested from before?
No, because that becomes a public record then when I do.
Oh, I see.
So we're talking on the phone. But we know your category, and I can kind of verbally tell you some of the
Gotcha.
thoughts that I have.
So the next work session on May 3rd begins at 9 a.m., correct?
And we will notice it for the same room.
Okay.
But we will notice the May 17th meeting for the boardroom downstairs.
That's also a regular board meeting,
10 o'clock.
No, May 10th is your regular board meeting.
May 3rd.
May
Yeah,
May
Yeah,
7th,
we did,
special
but
call for
yeah.
this purpose only.
I think we changed that.
Capri still has a question.
Kathy, what time do you have for the May 3rd meeting? Some people
I
have
have
9,
it.
some people have 10.
I have 10.
10 o'clock?
Oh, it's 10
10 to
o'clock?
11 is what I
May
got.
3rd is at 10.
May
It
3rd is
says,
10
it
a.m.
says 10 on our calendar.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
that
'cause we have the honors breakfast that morning that ends
Oh,
at 9.
that's right.
That's what
Okay.
that was.
So the honors breakfast.
Okay.
10 o'clock.
And May 17th, what time did we?
I think we had that breakfast.
We have that.
Oh, 10 a.m. It's on the timeline as well.
May 17th, 10 a.m. and May 3rd, okay, great.
Okay.
So at the May 3rd meeting, we're gonna create additional questions for the finalists. And then it seems like, will there be additional follow-up for the contract negotiation? Or have we completed that
We just
today?
missed that last.
Pretty much.
I think we've completed it.
So will we need to update the timeline since we've completed that today?
We
It's
need
on
to
the
designate a
17th.
person, determine if the chair is gonna work with you or.
As he's drafting as he's going through the drafting, if he has any additional questions,
Yeah.
I think we want to leave it on there in case he has some additional questions that he needs final clarification on. Is that fair?
I agree, yes. Yeah.
And will you email the draft to all of us?
Yes, I will, and that should be done before May 3rd.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, then, any questions that we can answer for any of you? The next thing you'll hear from me after we get your questions will be the official responses to those questions that have been posed from each of the finalists. I'll be sending out a communication to all of the applicants, letting them know that you selected 3 finalists, thanking them for applying, as well as we will be individually contacting each of the 3 finalists. So we'll do all of that work. And they'll start asking us some questions and that sort of stuff, and it's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. I always enjoy the responses to questions because, like you said, it's another little peek in another room, and this is specific questions that you'll be asking related to your priorities, so I'm excited. Questions by you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great work.
Have a great afternoon, everyone. Be safe.
Stay adjourned.
Adjourned.